This Shohei Ohtani stat really puts things into perspective.
Recently, I was scrolling through shorts when I stumbled upon this clip regarding attendance when Shohei Ohtani was pitching.
The Miami Marlins average attendance for Wednesday games this season, 7,950 fans. But when Shohei Ohtani came to town in Miami on a Wednesday night, 18,741 fans showed up.
This shocked me. I know Ohtani is on his way to becoming one of the best big leaguers to ever do it, but to double attendance at an away game is absurd. So I took to the internet to find out if this happens every single time he throws. Unfortunately for me, there weren't any other articles or videos out there explaining this phenomenon. Nor were there easily accessible stats for teams' attendance by days of the week. So that meant I had to do some digging if I truly wanted to find the answer to my question. Let's cover the steps that I needed to go through to figure this out, aka my process. Firstly, I needed to identify what days Ohtani was in the lineup as the starting pitcher and where that game took place. This part was easy. If you hop onto MLB.com, you can search any player's name and see his appearances listed out by date, his opponent, and of course, his stats from those outings. With that information, all I needed to do is copy down the important bits into Excel so I could move on to step 2. Step 2 then is to determine the attendance of each of the games that Shohei pitched in. This took a few extra clicks, but again wasn't that challenging. From that same screen I was on before on MLB.com, you can click on the dates alongside the player's stat line from each game. And if you scroll all the way down, there's a ton of logistical information about each game, such as the start time, weather, and most importantly, that game's attendance. To complete this step, all I had to do was input that information over onto my original Excel, lining up with each of the dates that I had acquired earlier. Finally, that brings us to step 3, or as I like to call it, the fun one. If you look back at the video I showed in the beginning, they claimed that they had the average attendance for a Wednesday game at home for the Marlins. In seeing that, I assumed online on a site like MLB.com or Baseball Reference, you would easily be able to find the average attendance by date for each team. However, in all of my searching, I could not find that information. So, what I had to do was work backwards. If you head over to sites like The Athletic or ESPN, you can find a schedule listed out with each team's games listed in chronological order. Alongside those games, you can see the team they played, whether it was home or away, scores, and that game's attendance. While this information was not sortable, it was a start. Armed with that information, all I needed to do was copy and paste that data into Excel. Sort out the games based on all of the venues Ohtani has thrown in his first 17 starts, and after a little bit of boring cleaning, I could create a nifty little pivot table that told me the average attendance for each team in their home ballpark, sorted by days of the week. I wonder if that other channel went through all of this work too. And with that, I had all of the information I needed to finally see if Ohtani truly draws a bigger crowd when he's on the mound, no matter where he is throwing, as compared to the team he's playing's average attendance that day of the week this season. Phew. Let's take a look at what I found. We're going to break this up first by home and away games. The way this is going to work is we have the day and team Ohtani pitched against. Below that, we will have the average attendance for that day of the week in black, and then Ohtani's attendance next to it. When the Ohtani attendance is green, that means he drew a bigger crowd that day. When it is red, that means that he drew less fans than that team's average attendance on that day of the week. Starting with home games here on the left side, you can see listed the comparison of normal attendance versus the Ohtani effect attendance. Overall, for his home starts, he drew more fans than average in 5 of his 9 starts this season, which averaged out to be nearly 1,500 more fans per game when he is on the mound. Now, that does come with some asterisks because he is pitching at home. The first one being that Ohtani was the Angels' opening day starter, which happens to be consistently one of the most attended to games of any team's season each year. That was by far the largest attended home game Ohtani has had this season. The next closest falls over 10,000 less fans on June 22nd against the Royals. And while I don't know how much this could have affected the attendance, the Angels did have a promotional event tied to celebrating the 20-year anniversary of their 0-2 World Series win that day. The last thing we need to take into consideration here is that Ohtani has typically been pitching on a 7-day cycle, meaning that every single one of his home starts has been either on a Wednesday or a Thursday. As you can tell by our average attendance numbers being one of these two options along the left column here. That's super important to remember, because if Ohtani is the one pitching on Wednesdays and Thursdays, the average attendance that we are comparing his attendance to happens to be the other games he's pitching in at home. Make sense? To combat this, we need to take an even closer look at his road starts. So let's do that now. On the right side here, we will utilize the same format for analyzing his starts that we did at home, but this time for his away games. Going down the list by date of his appearances, we will compare the average attendance for that day of the week compared to the attendance Ohtani brought in each of his starts. In green, we will see games he brought in more fans, and in red, we will see games where he did not. Surprisingly enough, the trend looks pretty similar for away games as well. In 5 of his 8 road starts this season, he brought in a larger crowd than what that team averaged on that day of the week, and he averaged nearly 1,000 more fans per game across those 8 starts. But if you look closely, there are some weird numbers here as well. The first being his June 2nd start against the Yankees, where the Ohtani attendance was almost 7,000 fans less than the Yankees' average attendance that day of the week. I had to investigate, and it turns out that this was a postponed game from the previous night that was now game 1 of a doubleheader, starting right in the middle of the day on a weekday. Furthermore, its original start time was postponed an hour and a half due to rainy conditions that day. And as most of you watching this channel know, rainy days don't bode well for fans at the ballpark, even with Ohtani on the mound. So that explains this massive gap as compared to his norm. The craziest difference between fans and his road starts was in fact the one mentioned in the short that inspired this video. On July 6th versus the Marlins, Ohtani nearly doubled that park's average attendance on Wednesdays this season. That's absurd. Overall this season, stadiums have seen an increased attendance in 10 of the 17 games Ohtani has started on the mound, bringing out an average of 1,200 more fans per game. To put that into perspective, that is nearly 20,000 additional fans this season alone. What Ohtani is doing is something special. But what else can we take away from this? The first thing I want each of you to take away from this video is that when you have an idea or a question, dig deep and answer it. I could have seen that short video, accepted it as what it was, and moved on to the next thing. Even after one quick Google search failing me, it would have been easy to quit then. But the process of digging into these questions is where true growth happens, and why baseball is such an interesting sport. There are numbers surrounding everything in this game, and if you're semi-decent with Excel, you can find the answers to some pretty cool questions within a few hours of research. Secondly, what can Major League Baseball take away from the Ohtani effect? Less and less fans are showing up to big league ballparks to cheer on their favorite teams. And while attendance is up from last season, we are still seeing 5% less fans as a whole from the last pre-pandemic season in 2019. Yes, I understand that there aren't any other Ohtanis out there who can hit and pitch at a top 25 level on both sides of the ball. But there are other stars who are better than Ohtani on the mound, and other stars who are better than Ohtani at the plate. So how can we celebrate them in the same way we do Shohei? Is it marketing? Is it providing fans with more in-depth information about the studs around the league? I don't know, and maybe you have an idea. Leave a comment down below. But what I do know is the Ohtani effect is good for our sport. So any way to leverage this phenomenon moving forward would be for the betterment of our game. Thanks for tuning into today's video, guys. If you enjoyed, please hit that subscribe button. If you want to keep learning more, here's a video and a playlist that I think you'd enjoy checking out. I'll catch you in the next one.